not interested in the spooky stuff, that's totally okay. This is just extra content that I want to do for you guys. So, alright. Herbert Richard Baumeister was born April 7th, 1947, to Dr. Herbert E. and Elizabeth Baumeister in the Courier and Ives, Butler, Tarkington area of Indiana. He had a sister named Barbara, who was born a year later, and two brothers that followed after that, Brad in 1954 and Richard in 1956. And as their father's medical practice progressed, he was an anesthesiologist. The family eventually moved to the affluent Washington Township. Now, Herb's childhood seemed pretty normal, but by the time he reached, adolescence, it became apparent that there was something about this kid at the time, that just wasn't quite right, if that makes sense. A close friend of his named Bill Donovan, who went to school with him, recalled that Herb would fall into these, strange revelries. He would kind of ponder some seemingly repulsive type things, like what it would be like to taste human urine. And he would do these really weird, out-of-character things. One morning on the way to school, he found a dead crow that had been hit by a car, and he picked it up and he put it in his pocket, and then while his teacher wasn't looking, he dropped it on her desk. So in his teenage years, he became irresponsible and often described as combustible. His behavior soon caught the attention of his father, who took Herb to get some examinations in private because, the doctor's son can't have anything wrong with him, right? A lengthy series of tests eventually diagnosed him as schizophrenic, having a 2 or more sided personality base. However, it would appear that he did not receive any further treatment for this. Now, because his high school, North Central, focused on sports activities, bookish Herb could not become part of the in crowd. He tried to be one of the bunch, but he just didn't blend in. And so he withdrew into himself, and he spent many hours alone. And according to his friend, he never dated anyone. In his college years, he remained ever directionless. He actually dropped out during his freshman year. He returned for a semester here and there throughout the next 4 years, but he never graduated from college. Nevertheless, through his father's persistence, his father was a well-respected man in the town. The Indianapolis Star, a major newspaper, hired teenage Herb as a copy boy. Kari, Donna, an advertising executive who worked for the paper, remembers Herb as sensitive. He was sensitive to the way that he was viewed and the way that he was treated by the people higher up at the newspaper. He obsessively wanted to be someone. He was well-dressed and eager, but again, he really did not fit in. One another job that his father was rumored to have secured for him, that he began ranting and raving at his fellow employees, really for no apparent reason. His tenure over the years marked odd behavior, according to former coworkers and others. One Christmas, he raised some eyebrows by sending coworkers a card with a photo of him and another man dressed in drag. Now, despite his in-house personality conflicts and erratic deployment, the Bureau nonetheless noticed an apparent go-get-em attitude mixed with a high degree of intelligence. It wasn't long after he earned the title of program director, where others might have at this point taken the challenge with exerted professionalism, that Herb's antics increased and flourished. Herb had displayed what those who knew him characterized as a bizarre sense of humor. While at the BMV, it took the form of urinating on his boss's desk. It was no secret around the office who the culprit was. Still, Herb managed to avoid being fired until he urinated on a letter that was addressed to the governor of Indiana. In November of 1971, Herb got married to Juliana, or Julie Sater, in the United Methodist Church of Indianapolis. I'm going to call her Julie. Was a college graduate, and she had been introduced to Herb by a mutual friend. And she was quite attracted to the tall, light-haired, boy-faced Bowmeister. And in their initial chat, they discovered they had a great deal of things in common. They were both young Republicans, and they both yearned to have their own businesses one day. Julie quit her job as a high school journalism instructor in the latter half of the 70s to concentrate on having a family. Besides, Herb was earning decent wages at the BMV, and 3 children followed: Marie in 1979, Eric in 1981, and Emily 3 years after that. When Herb was asked to leave the BMV, the ever-faithful Julie returned to teaching to supplement her husband's income through an assortment of odd jobs. He eventually wound up working for a thrift shop, and while he found the job kind of menial at first, he soon really realized the potential available in a place like that. So he and Julie talked it over, and based on Herb's acquired knowledge of running such an outlet over the 3 years that he'd worked there, they decided to invest what money they had into owning their own store. They borrowed $4,000 from Herb's now widowed mother, and in 1988 opened a store you may have heard of, Save-A-Lot Thrift, in conjunction with the highly respected Children's Bureau of Indianapolis. This is a charity benefiting the area's families. This shop opened at 46th Street, sold used clothing, household goods, and a number of second-hand items. The inventory technically belonged to the charity, which in turn received a contracted percentage of the proceeds. Shoppers found the Save-A-Lot tidy and offering only quality merchandise. It became a popular place for families on a budget to shop. And in no time, Herb and Julie received high praise from the Children's Bureau, whose human cause greatly benefited from the couple's obvious management skills. The store earned $50,000 in its first year, and soon they expanded to open a second location. Now that they were successful business people, in 1991, the Bowmeisters moved from their middle-class home into the fashionable Westfield district, nearly 20 miles from Indianapolis, in Hamilton County. And here they bought an elegant Tudor-style home called happy about it. And more than once, the couple did split up, albeit briefly. The house itself seemed to adopt the tension within its walls. Neighbors and business associates who entered the Fox Hollow estate later recalled that the rooms were cluttered and unkempt. The Baumisters, they said, lacked order, or more appropriately, kind of ignored it. The once groomed grounds of this manor house became overgrown and unkempt. When Julie and Herbert started to really have issues, Julie would often take the kids to visit Grandma Baumeister for weeks on end at her condominium on Lake Wawasee. Jeez, Shannon. Oh. The couple would tell their friends that Herb did not go along because he had to stay and take care of the business. So he was free to do whatever he wanted while Julie and the kids were at his mother's house. And he did. Much of his free time was spent cruising Indianapolis's gay community. With an empty house to play in, Herb began to take men back there to party. He now had this freedom to explore his sexuality and act out his fantasies. And this was the beginning of the end. And it really starts with a man named Roger Goodlet. Roger Goodlet vanished without a trace, and besides his family, nobody really seemed to care. In the early 1990s, Indianapolis, a man who was seen at a gay bar for the last time really didn't garner much attention from law enforcement, which makes me infuriated, whatever. Now, luckily for Roger and his family, he had a friend named Tony Harris. And Tony did care, and Tony offered to help Roger's family in any way that he could. Tony began plastering missing posters with Roger's face all over the gay bar scene that they frequented. And one night, he was sitting in a bar, and he noticed this man sitting at the bar, staring straight ahead at one of these posters. And according to Tony, this man was sitting there, silently staring at this poster, while very oddly, licking his lips. Tony immediately felt his stomach drop, and his intuition told him that this man knew something about his friend Roger's disappearance. So, very bravely, Tony makes his way over to this man and thought, maybe I'm crazy, maybe this is nothing. Just because this guy seemed odd, did that make him a killer? So, he in fact almost turned around, but he convinced himself that he had to know if his feelings were leading him in the right direction. So, he goes over and he kind of talks this man up. This guy introduces himself as Brian Smart. They kind of chit-chat, have a couple drinks, and eventually Brian asks Tony if he wants to go someplace with him. Tony accepts the invitation, and they venture out of the city and down dark country roads until they reach an estate called Fox Hollow Farm. Brian told Tony that he was a landscaper and he was working there getting the house ready for his employer to move in. The two men traveled through the house and into the basement where the indoor pool was located. Tony describes seeing one of the creepiest things that I have ever seen, and guys, seriously, Google this photo. Around the pool, there were all these mannequins in different positions. At the bar, on the tables, at the tables around the pool, on the chairs. And Brian tells Tony his boss doesn't like to be alone, and that's why there were mannequins everywhere. No, dude, that's creepy. Tony just kind of added it to the list of disappearances. I know you hurt my friend, and I am going to the police. Brian laughs and he's like, I've gotten away with it all this time. No one is gonna believe you. And I am not sure how Tony got out of the house. I'm imagining it's because Herb could not, overpower him. But Tony leaves and he goes to the police and they just don't believe him. And really, Herb had every right to be kind of arrogant because so far no one had really done anything about the men that had gone missing. So Tony goes to the police and he tells them that there's a man out there strangling people in Hamilton County. The police attempt to locate the property, but they were not able to find Fox Hollow Farm, nor could they attach any of the homes in the area to a man named Brian Smart. But somehow, and the details are slim, Brian continues to contact Tony, so they must have exchanged phone numbers, which I don't understand. Whatever. Unfortunately, Brian, was really smart. He called on a cell phone or on a payphone, which was virtually untraceable 25 years ago. And during some of these conversations that he had with Tony, he dropped hints that he had killed many people. And while he is still harassing Tony, more people are going missing. Men keep disappearing from these same bars. And Tony is like, no, I am not letting this happen. So Tony tries to find Herb again. And he does. And this time he gets his license plate number. And he takes it straight to the police. And the police run the plates. And they find out that this man is actually Herb Baumeister. And now, with a name and an address, investigators were able to start putting pressure on Mr. Baumeister. Detective Mary Wilson of the Indianapolis Police Department paid Herb a visit at one of his Save-A-Lot thrift stores. And this visit visibly shook Herb and really heightened law enforcement's suspicions that he was the guy they were looking for. Detective Wilson says that he got nervous and fidgety, and when she presented him this evidence of having seen him at these bars around the time of these men's disappearances, it sent him into this panic. And he really didn't want the public to know that this married straight guy frequented gay bars. When they asked him to search his property at Fox Hollow Farm, he said, not without a warrant. So they approach Julie. Detective Wilson was conflicted at this point because she really didn't know if Herb 100% had anything to do with these men, and they were about to approach his wife to say, hey, we're investigating your husband for homosexual homicide. This could go so many wrong ways. But Julie's shock and anger really turned into disbelief. She called Detective Wilson and defended her husband, saying he was never violent in his life, not one time, and now he's being investigated for murder. She said if they wanted to search the property, they would have to get a warrant, and if they did that, she would personally give them a tour of Fox Hollow Farm. So the investigators at this point only have Tony's story and some circumstantial evidence that Herb was at the bars around the times these men went missing. So that is not enough to get a warrant. So now, the Baummeisters were already on shaky ground in their marriage, right? And Julie is just really confused and really upset. Their business is failing. Herb is getting a timeline on when exactly this was, but it was before Herb started to be investigated for all of these crimes. When they were originally discovered, he told her that they were the model skeletons that his father had used at his medical practice. He stated that he was a pack rat and he kept everything, but he decided to bury them in the backyard. And at the time, it was a pretty acceptable answer to Julie. She didn't know the difference between a plastic skeleton and a real skeleton, and sometimes in those days, in the 70s, they did use real skeletons, before the 70s even, because it was, they used skeletons from people that had donated their bodies and things like that. So she calls her lawyer, and her lawyer calls Mary Wilson. Mary Wilson drives anxiously to Fox Hollow Farms the next day, and accompanying her were two very skeptical Hamilton County police officials, Captain Tom Anderson of the County Sheriff's Office, and a detective, Jeff Markham. In truth, Anderson was sure that these human remains that Mary Wilson wanted to find would turn out to be animal bones. He wasn't too shy, even to Mary's face, to directly apprise the woman's suspicion as bullshit. Julie Baumeister, with her attorney Windling at her side, met the law enforcement people at her front door that afternoon, and she led them through the house and out into the wooded backyard. Remember, it's 18.5 acres. They walk for a little, and she points at a spot where 2 years earlier, I guess I did find that date, her son Eric had found a skeleton. And the reason that she'd not notified authorities is because she believed Herb's story about these bones being nothing more than a dissecting skeleton. But his actions of late really kind of made her question. So the yard at Fox Hollow Farm, at first glance, really seemed normal. But as the men began to kick through the low grass and the patches of dirt, really almost nearly just beyond their back patio, premises. This time, other officials joined in on the original search party to conduct a thorough dig of the premises. Among the group was prosecuting attorney named Sonia Learcamp and like a half a dozen detectives. Now Rocky came too, with 2 assistants, Matt Williamson and Christopher Schmidt, to perform a scientific examination of what was obviously a secreted cemetery. The anthropological team began the hunt by placing small orange flags into the ground whenever a bone fragment appeared. You guys, in only a half an hour, they dropped nearly 100 such markers. Summing it up, Naraki claimed it looked like a mass disaster scene. While this dig continued into the late hours, other policemen went and checked the interior of Fox Hollow Farm. They found the mannequins, the wet bar, the pool, just as Tony Harris had told them. However, they uncovered something that Tony had not noticed in his evening with Herb. A semi-hidden video camera that the police immediately suspected had been used to tape Herb's crimes. This case was getting more bizarre, like hourly. Now, at this point, Julie starts to get anxious. She's at the house. Herb is out. And she starts to worry about Eric, who is with Herb at the lake with his mother. Reality starts setting in, and she's like, okay, my husband could be a murderer. What would he do to our children? So she thinks, what will he go to? What lengths will he go to if he finds out what's happening at home? Professor Learcamp and a county judge quickly draw up custody papers to remove Eric from Herb's presence. And Herb really tried to kind of keep custody of his child, but it didn't work. And he really had no reason to suspect that his secret was literally being uncovered by the minute back at Fox Hollow. He figured that this custody action was just a ploy by his soon-to-be ex-wife to counteract his latest divorce movements. When police showed up with the proper papers to escort Eric back to Julie, Herb released him calmly and without menace. But back at Fox Hollow Farm, plenty was happening. County interrogators, led by the sheriff's detective, Kenneth Wisman, were beginning to put the pieces of the Bowmeister puzzle together. I have filmed too much, y'all. Compost piles yielded heavy degrees of bones where it appeared the killer had burned his corpses under piles of leaves and garbage. They interviewed Tony, who told them of Herb's obsession with strangling. A big question they had was, how could he have strangled and burned and buried these men without his family noticing? But it was answered in an interview with Julie. She explained that sometimes, for several months at a time, especially in the summer, she and the kids went to the widow Bowmeisters to leave Herb alone at home. Now they took a timeline of when she was gone and when the victims disappeared, and the incidents matched. Meanwhile, excavations in the backyard were still going on without pause. The number of diggers had swelled to about 60 volunteers, mostly off-duty policemen and firefighters. The first couple of days' search had produced an amazing 5,500 bones, teeth, and bone fragments, which, according to Naraki, made up about 4 bodies. Feels like it should be a lot more. After they had combed the entire 18 acres of Fox Hollow Farms, members of the team would soon learn that their search was far from over. Neighbors from an adjacent farm crossed into the police cordon to inform them that they had found evidence of yet more bones on their property next door. They led investigators to an area cut through a drainage ditch that separated the 2 properties. Here in this ditch were were so many human ribs, vertebrae, and spines that one of the officials murmured, "Jesus Christ, they're everywhere." The bones were so numerous and more intact than on the Balmeester land that they actually stuck up visibly from the mud. Can you imagine? Shovels drew up not only more bones, but with them cans of Miller Genuine Draft Beer, which was Herb's favorite, and handcuffs that had probably bound these victims in death. By the time the exhumation of this area ended, and by the time that the 140 bones were estimated as those belonging to another 7 men, the mortal count had risen to an estimatedly 11 men that Herb had killed. It would be September before the anthropologists were able to identify some of these men. And disappointedly, only 4 identified victims were named at the time: Roger Gauntlett, Stephen Hale, Richard Hamilton, and Manuel Resendez. To this day, the remains of others at Fox Hollow Farm are waiting to be identified. I believe that 8 of them have been identified, but I'll look that up in just a second. I had it in my notes, but I took it out because I thought I duplicated myself, but I guess I didn't. So you're wondering now, where is Herb, right? Where is this guy, okay? Because he's not in jail. He's not in jail. He ran from his mother's house and, like his victims, kind of faded into the mist. The only clue that the police had actually came from his brother. His brother called Detective Wisman on June 29th, 5 days after the police had found this graveyard behind the house. And Brad had told the police that his older brother had phoned him from the little Michigan town of Venville, saying he was on a trip, but he needed Brad to send him some money quickly. Brad sent the cash, but afterwards found out about the goings-on at Fox Hollow Farm, and he notified the authorities immediately. So, we're kind of guessing as to what happened here. As best that can be determined, Herb, in his 1989 gray Buick, left Wawasee and headed north. He arrived at Venville around the 28th of June. The next day, he reached Port Huron, where he again phoned Brad, asking for more money. But by this time, he had spoken with the police, and Brad was asked to tell his brother And soon after moving in, the new owners start to tell stories. Strange goings on in this house. Shadowy male figures were seen, one of them walking around without legs, in the house and in the backyard. And this location became a hotspot for paranormal researchers. About 5 years ago, the owners agreed to open their house for regular visits from the haunted house travel company. And one of my favorite paranormal investigators and researchers and writers, Troy Taylor, went there, and he said it did not disappoint. His groups have reported hearing voices, footsteps, other strange sounds, the feeling sensations of being punched, pinched, and hit